Welcome to the Mission First People Always podcast. We're glad you're here. And now our host, Dr. Mike Patterson.
It's Dr. Mike Patterson, your host of the Mission First People Always podcast, where we talk about what it takes to be a great leader and how to build great teams. I'm the author of the book, Mission First People Always, the definitive guide to balancing people and performance. It's available on Amazon or wherever you buy books online. And if you don't have a copy, you definitely need a copy. I'm also a trainer, consultant, and coach focused on leader and team development. Let me remind you, as I always do, to subscribe or follow, leave a review, and tell a friend about our podcast. The good word about good leadership is getting out around the world as a result of what we're doing on the podcast, and I'm excited to be doing this with you and for you. I do the podcast because I want to help people lead better and get more done with their teams. I believe all of the folks I invite on the show can add value to your leadership journey, and I like to showcase talented people who care as deeply about healthy organizations and good leadership as I do. So this is part 2 of a conversation I began with George Reynolds and Colleen Mizuki, the co-founders of Trellis Life Management. The previous episode, if you haven't heard it, the first part of our conversation, please listen to that so you know where we are. You'll hear their stories a little more fully. What I heard in that first episode was so good, I couldn't stop. So I continued. I captured much more than we could reasonably put into one podcast. So I made it a two episode conversation, and I'm excited to share it with you today. So let's pick up the conversation where we left off.
Welcome to the Mission First People Always podcast, where we talk about better business results, stronger teams, more successful careers, and happier lives. Along the way, we hope to bust some biases, build some bridges, and have some fun. We're glad you're here. And now, our host, Dr. Mike Patterson.
You know, I love origin stories, and George, you just shared the origin story of Trellis Life Management in a beautiful and powerful way. I think we can all see ourselves in that scene that Colleen described. And George, you were kind of saying that you were like the general who was interacting with people with a style and an approach that wasn't very effective, and it was an expression of what you were feeling on the inside. But many of us have always also been on the receiving end of behavior like that. I can only imagine that a 2-star Marine general, even though retired, is probably still a pretty big personality and maybe even an intimidating figure. Is it possible, if we are on the receiving end of that behavior, to respond in a healthy, positive way, or to give feedback to that person that would be useful and helpful? Or how do we protect ourselves in those stressful moments where you've got that intimidating person in your face? I mean, this is really practical for folks.
Well, excellent question. That's really where the rubber meets the road, isn't it? Is we can't change anybody else. We can model for people, and we can take care of ourselves as best we can in the healthiest way. And so to answer that, I worked very hard to keep myself regulated and spent many, many long moments during the day doing the practices myself. At some point, however, the harm becomes so significant that the best thing we can do is leave the project. And that's what I chose to do, because there was no way that he would be open at all to perhaps shifting an approach that he must think works. So when I left the project and he asked if I would please consider staying, I tried to reach out and say I would be happy to consider it if we could have an honest conversation and show mutual respect to each other. And I never heard back from him again. So I can only do so much, and that is to regulate myself and then to do what I need to do to take care of myself and protect myself from a toxic situation. And I think a lot of listeners have been in those types of situations.
If I may, just to add to that, and again, this goes back to what I just shared with you a few moments ago, Mike. Excuse me. So I have an adversarial relationship with the government client that we service. And over the years, I've always allowed his behavior to drive my response and then my behavior. And many times, I would dig in my heels as that former Army officer. And, I would respond in kind and we wouldn't achieve anything. In fact, it would deteriorate. But at the end of the day, I always had to comply because, again, he's the government client. Well, through the practices, the brain, mind, body system practices that Colleen introduced me to, because the event it was altering in my life, when I approached that same individual now, and this happened just as recently as Tuesday of last week. It was another situation where he came to me and, demonstrated poor leadership qualities, but more importantly, just bad behavior. But I was anticipating it because I just knew from past performances it would be something that would trigger him. And so I actually took a few minutes to ground myself. And by grounding, I just, and it's part of the practice, but I just allowed myself to prepare mentally and physically for what I knew would be his reaction, his response. And so when that occurred, I was mentally and physically and emotionally prepared. And, it went much better than it had previously. And so that's just one instance where these techniques and practices have helped me, and they'll continue to help me because I find myself now, if I'm in traffic, especially, I've been here in the National Capital Region for a couple of weeks now, but I'm actually from Georgia, and that's where I live, and I don't deal with traffic. We'll use that as an example. And I've had some stressful moments last week sitting in traffic because I hate wasting time. And I found myself having to ground while in the car. So I didn't have a mental meltdown over taking an hour and a half to go 3 miles. So it not only applies in relationships, it applies, or it's applicable in any situation where you feel yourself getting stressful.
Well, George, I was going to invite you out to visit with me in the Los Angeles area, but knowing you're
I love
concerned
Los Angeles.
concern for traffic, you'll have to do a lot of grounding out here.
I've been well taught, and I practice on a daily basis, so I'm good to go.
All right. One of the other things I know that Trellis Life Management, and we're talking to George Reynolds and Colleen Mizuki about what the work they do for their clients. One of the things that you help people do is tune out some of maybe this overwhelming body of information that seems to pour over us on a daily basis, or maybe it's tune into in order to understand how it affects our perception and decision making. But it seems like more and more and more, we have more and more and more coming at us. I don't remember life being like this when I was a younger guy. It seemed like it was easier to focus, but now we're just bombarded with so much. Either Colleen or George or both of you, how would you guide me on being able to focus more effectively and just understand what is influencing my perception and decision making in a way that's not helpful?
Really well posed. That question shows already a deep understanding of yourself, I think. So well done. You are right. We are bombarded with way too much information, and it's getting more and more so to be the case with so many sources of input to our brains. So what these practices do is, we've been giving examples of the practice and how we use them when we're in a heightened, highly stressed state. Well, what the practices actually do is, if they're done regularly, kind of like drinking water throughout the day, right? We need to hydrate ourselves and our cells. These practices will nourish our brain, mind, body system and keep it, as we call, regulated throughout the day. So we do the practices when we're not stressed. We do them when we're sitting down to have a cup of tea. We do them when we're sitting outside listening to the birds. So we want to make them an integrated part of our day, And what that does is so that when we do have those moments of a stressor hitting us upside the head, we are able to more quickly re-regulate so that we can see more clearly, make better decisions under stress. They have a foundational benefit of allowing us to see more clearly in any moment, take in the information, filter out what's irrelevant. And basically the reason is because we are creating a more coherent set of signals between the body, the brain, and the mind. We're actually like that crew team rowing on the river where they're all rowing in sync. Instead of oars going off in different directions, we're creating a signaling system between the gut, the heart, the brain, so that in any given moment, even though we're bombarded with way too much input, it's not having the same effect on us. It's not creating as much stress and chaos in our brains. So I hope that makes a little bit of sense.
It makes so much sense. I have nothing more to add.
Well,
Seriously.
I was going to ask you, George, how do you do that? What does it look like? It sounds as though, and I'm projecting into this, that, I need to go and contort myself into a yoga pose or something and light a candle to do this. And I'm being facetious, obviously. But how do you do it in your daily life when you're in the car in traffic, as you just mentioned, or you're about to walk into a meeting with someone where you've had some relational history that it hasn't always been great? What is that? What do you do?
It's a combination of things. And again, it's a great question, and it's not an easy question to answer. But for me, the way it works is I try religiously every day to begin my day with meditation. Right. So I typically do it in the same spot at the same time because I'm very regimented, and you don't have to. You just have to be, I think, do it on a regular basis and just be very, very diligent in your meditation. Not when you do it, but it's more important that you do it on a routine basis. So for me, it begins with meditation. That kind of sets the tone for me, is to have that 15 minutes where I'm doing nothing but sitting. I meditate sitting down in a chair so I can feel different things in my body. I can feel the pressure of my butt, if you will, on the chair. I can feel the pressure of my feet against the floor. I can feel the pressure of my back against the chair. I sit there, I relax, and I begin to notice the sensations in my body and just notice them. And that allows me to become more one with my body. It actually, makes me feel relaxed, and it provides me a good start point. So when I'm sitting in the car and I'm in a traffic jam and I feel my stresses, right? I feel my jaw clench. I feel my heart rate start to increase. I start by doing some controlled breathing exercises, right? I'm already sitting down, so I'm already in that meditation position, if you will. So instead of sitting in a chair, I'm sitting in the seat of my car, but I still can feel my feet on the floor, whether it's on the brake pedal or whether I'm in park and both my feet are planted on the floorboard. I can feel my butt, the backs of my legs against the seat, and I can feel my back against the seat. And I do the same thing as I do when I meditate. I start to just breathe, controlled breathing, and just become aware of what my body's doing, where I feel some tenseness, where I feel, in some cases, pain or discomfort. I acknowledge that. I'm not judgmental. And I just, because I'm aware of it, in essence, for me, it relaxes me and it puts me at ease, and my stress level goes down, and I'm just more focused on myself and not the situation I find myself in. So by virtue of that, I've taken control of my body. I've not let my body take control of me and drive my reactions.
Colleen, has George been a good student?
He's been an amazing student. And I really appreciate your question about bringing it even to a more practical level, because, it can be done anywhere, anytime. And it's just doing it regularly. For those out there listening who engage in prayer, it can be part and parcel of just grounding and opening ourselves up to prayer. right? By feeling our behinds on the seat, or standing, feeling your feet on the ground. And it can be done before eating. It can be done on an elliptical machine, for heaven's sake. It can be done anywhere while waiting in line. And so it really just becomes a go-to awareness of a body in contact with another surface, which can have an immediate effect on the entire system. So yeah, no, this has been, I really appreciate the opportunity to speak about this. Yeah, George has been stellar.
I've been still over a while. I always wasn't that way. Like I mentioned earlier, for the first 4 years of her trying to lead me towards these processes and these techniques and practices, I was facetious. You mentioned being facetious earlier, Mike. I'm not implying where I don't agree. I don't think you were being facetious, but I sure as heck was. And I said, I was insulting. I think I don't need that. This is crap. This is Hinduism. This is, just go burn your candles and your incense somewhere else. And I'd say it sometimes joking, but sometimes I really meant what I said. And, I chalked that up to just being closed-minded and self-assured. And I had my stress reliever. It was called working out in the gym, right? And I thought that could get me through anything. It certainly got me through my 31-year Army career and multiple tours and combat, but I was wrong. Right? These practices are what really, really changed my life. And I mean that very, very sincerely.
What's encouraging to me is I think, George, you and I are roughly the same age, and you experience this great positive change as a result of your embrace of some new ideas and practices. And I guess the message to anyone is it's not too late to learn. It's not too late to change. It's not too late to improve if we have an open mind and we're curious and we're willing to try new things. So, friends, it is hard to believe, but we've been talking for a long time here. I've greatly enjoyed this conversation. As my faithful listeners know, the question I always like to ask near the end of an interview is let's make it real. Let's bring it down to earth for the average person listening, the average manager listening. What's one thing, and I'll give you both the opportunity to give me the one thing from each of you that my listeners can begin doing now that will help them in some positive way, maybe be a better leader, maybe be a better teammate, maybe be a better human being. What's one thing from each of you?
Very quickly, anybody listening right now, you can still hear my voice, but I would like for you to take your attention and just feel where your body is in contact with another surface. Whether you're standing, you can feel the weight of your body sort of being pulled into the ground. You can feel that at the bottom of your feet. You can feel your backside or your back up against the chair, and just allow your attention to rest there for even 10 seconds. And then notice what happens. That's what I would suggest.
Okay. And Mike, from my perspective, if you allow me, I'd like to use a quote and then a brief story which underscores the importance of what I have to say. So I think the most important thing you can do as a leader is empower all of your people around you and encourage them to be leaders. And I'm going to use a quote that was uttered and written by the 6th president of the United States, John Quincy Adams. And I think it really resonates. I mean, he said, if your actions inspire others to dream more, learn more, do more, and become more, you are a leader. And so I would always have my subordinates, I'd always have them raise their hand when I ask the question, who thinks they're a leader here? Mostly, especially in subordinates, unless they were NCOs, 1 or 2 hands would go up. And I would say, you're all leaders, right? Because if you've inspired somebody to dream more, learn more, do more, or become more, by definition, you're a leader. And so a story I'll tell you that kind of underscores this. So going along with that, I'll say you have to support that. You can not only tell them they're a leader, but you have to endorse them and support them. In Afghanistan in 2014, I was a civilian advisor in Afghanistan. I was a GS-15, which is it's a colonel equivalent rank in the Department of Defense. That's not what's important. What's important is I was in charge of a team of advisors, and I had advisors from all branches of the service, civilians, and personnel from across the NATO countries. So I had an individual from Turkey on my team. I had 2 police officers from Estonia on my team. And in theory, not in theory, in actuality, I was the leader of this team. But I knew there was some trepidation on some of their parts. First time they'd ever been in combat zone. And they didn't want to do things like drive in the Afghan Kabul traffic, which is very intimidating and very, very dangerous. Lost a lot of people to IEDs. And so one of the things I said is, well, I'm the leader, but we're all leaders. And I'll prove that to you. I'm going to drive some days. And some days, each and every one of you is going to be the mission commander for that day. So I had an individual named Major John Munsey on my team. And he was a mission leader for one day in particular. And we had someone from the organization in SES, which is a Senior Executive Service Personnel. It's a civilian. It was a 2-star equivalent. And he asked if he could go out with us on our convoy to the Ministry of Defense. We said yes. Our Munsey's mission brief will be tomorrow at 06:30. He came strolling in at 06:45 with a cup of coffee in his hand that he had stopped to purchase at the local place on the installation. And Major Munsey, without skipping a beat, again, I had made him the mission commander brief for that day. Said, "I'm sorry, sir, we've already started our brief. You're 15 minutes late. You won't be going with us today." And the SES looked over at me as in his mind, the true leader. And he looked at me and he said, "What's he telling me?" I said, "Well, he's telling you what he, as the mission commander, has decided. See you tomorrow." And so I think you have to encourage all of your personnel to think that they can be a leader, or they already are a leader. You have to endorse them. And then most importantly, when you allow them, provide them that opportunity, you have to support them.
Wow. Great advice. Great advice from both of you. I'm sure that many of my listeners are thinking, how do I reach out to these folks? They're doing some really cool things. I'd like to learn more. Maybe I'd like to work with Trellis Life Management. How can people reach you? And I'll just also say we're going to put contact information in the show notes. But George and Colleen, what's the best way for people to connect with you?
Okay, the best way for me right now is just to shoot me an email. And my email address is very simple. It's George, George, at Trellis, TRELLISLM.com. I'm very responsive. I'll respond to all and every email, and I'll do it in a timely fashion. But that's the way, it would be the quickest and most direct way to reach me. And I invite anyone to reach out to me.
Thank
And
you.
our
Colleen, go
website,
ahead.
yep, no, our website is being updated right now, but we expect in a couple of weeks it'll be active. And my email address is the same as George's, just with a different first name. So COLLEEN at TrellisLM.com.
Oh, well, she had to throw the Lima Mike in there. I was going to say, yeah, some 31-year veteran of the United States Army, when he gave his email address, he didn't use the phonetic alphabet. And so Colleen had to show me up on that. So thank you very much, Al.
You're welcome, sir. Thank you, Dr. Mike.
Colleen, I understood what you meant with that phonetic alphabet. So thank you both. You guys have been tremendous guests on the Mission First People Always podcast. I'm still taking it in and reeling a bit with all that I've learned today. So I hope my listeners have learned a great deal as well. I just encourage all of my listeners to leave a review for this episode or these 2 episodes, and just tell the world how valuable this information was for you. Tell a friend about the kind of conversations we have on the Mission First People Always podcast. And until next time, be a good human being and lead well.
I sincerely thank you for this wonderful opportunity. I've enjoyed this tremendously. So thank you. Thank you very much.
You do great work in the world, Mike. Thank you.
You're very welcome. Thanks, everyone. Again, thanks for listening. If you like what you've heard, subscribe or follow, leave a review, and tell a friend. You can learn more about what I do and connect with me at drmikepatterson.com. And if you haven't ordered your copy of the Mission First People Always book, and you like what you've heard today, I think there's a good fit there. Please grab a copy of the book. And as always, remember that people and performance go hand in hand. Please come back for the next episode of the Mission First People Always podcast.
Thanks for listening. We hope you enjoyed today's episode. If you want to create a stronger, more people-centric and empowered culture for your organization, visit drmikepatterson.com.